You ready? Okay. All right, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for being here on this beautiful spring day. Before I begin, I want to give a special thanks to the elected officials who will be joining us. Cook County Board, Tony Preckwinkle will be here shortly, and I want to also acknowledge Gil Villegas, Alderman in Chicago. While we obviously need to be focused on Chicago, I think we all know and believe that Chicago is so much more than our mere municipal boundaries. As Chicago goes, so does the entire Chicagoland region, and very much vice versa. We cannot be a strong and vital city without our neighbors and partners in suburban Cook, DuPage, Lake, Kendall, Kane, and Will counties also being part of that equation. So I am honored and grateful that Cook County Board President Tony Preckwinkle will be part of this very important effort. Similarly, I thank my friend, Alderman Gil Villegas, who also helped coordinate the regional response component to this recovery task force work. I'd also like to acknowledge and thank the other business and community leaders who will be part of this effort, starting with Sam Skinner, who's agreed to co-chair this effort with me. Some know his resume, but hearts warrant emphasis. He's a lawyer and a businessman, having served as a former U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Illinois. He served as a U.S. Transportation Secretary and then later became the Chief of Staff to former President Herbert Walker Bush. I've known Sam for over 30 years. He's a friend, a confidant, and most importantly, knows and loves Chicago. I am deeply appreciative that he's agreed to co-chair this effort, and so thank you to Sam. I also want to extend my thanks to Roberto Herencia, Chairman of Byline Bank, Alexa James, Executive Director of the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and Anton Seals, Executive Director of Grow Greater Englewood. And finally, I'd also like to acknowledge Bob Ryder, President of the Chicago Federation of Labor, who is not only a respected labor leader, he's a respected thought leader, who is also joining us today and in this effort. Throughout this crisis, I've kept our announcements indoors, but today we've made an exception because of this site and its significance for us in this moment. This past September, we celebrated a 150-year anniversary of the magnificent water tower. In that time, this building has become a true landmark to our city's history, representing our boundless ingenuity, artistry, and resiliency as a people. This place is as much an icon of ourselves as our lake and our flag. And just as our city has been shaped around the water tower, it has also shaped us, bridging our past and our present, and guiding us along our path to the future. It's that heritage and meaning that brings us here today. Just 2 years after this water tower was built, our city was destroyed by a great fire that burned a third of our booming town to the ground, decimating over 17,000 buildings, leaving nearly 100,000 people homeless and at least 300 people dead. Amidst that destruction, one of the few things that remained was this building. Oh, wait. And who says our first responders aren't working hard every day? They're out there. Let me go back. That fire decimated over 17,000 buildings, leaving nearly 100,000 people homeless and at least 300 people dead. Amidst that destruction, one of the few things that remained was this building, becoming the landmark from which we embark on a new era, a new beginning, around which we would build and build and build into the magnificent city we see all around us today. We may commemorate the Great Fire in our flag, museums, sports teams, and culture, but what we celebrate is also what came after. It's the story of a city that not only grew from the ashes, literally, but grew larger, stronger, and more powerful than ever before. And it's that legacy that brings us here today, back to our landmark of resiliency and the point of our rebirth, just as it has so many times before. The crisis we face today is like nothing any of us has ever experienced. Across our city, the numbers of the unemployed have reached a staggering 17 million, and non-payments for rent have skyrocketed over 60% since the beginning of April. Meanwhile, in the month of March alone, 250,000 in the Chicago area made unemployment insurance claims. And requests for food assistance spiked by 50% in the weeks following the stay-at-home order. And that's all on top of the lives, the businesses, and the wages lost in our city. Not to mention, hold on. Not to mention the separation and emotional anguish that's hit all of us and those we know. We have to acknowledge people are hurting. In just 6 weeks' time, we have woken up to a city very different than the one we knew, shocking us in ways even the past crises of great recessions, depressions, and 2 world wars never did. The strengths of our city shine through in many ways, large and small. But the vulnerabilities that we all knew, those are flashing like a neon sign every day. Our fellow Chicagoans, who were already struggling long before this crisis, their burdens have become profound during this pandemic. As hard as this crisis has been for all of us, it's those Chicagoans whose pain is most acutely felt, and those whose future is more uncertain. Now, we don't know when this crisis will end. The virus has been unpredictable from the start. But what we do know is that when it comes to recovering from this crisis, there can be no half measures, no cutting corners. It will require bold, visionary action that will build on the measures that we have already taken. What we are embarking on is nothing less than the most breathtaking recovery effort our city has ever seen. It's for that reason that we have created the COVID-19 Recovery Task Force. The men and women we brought together are as diverse and dynamic as Chicago itself, drawn from across industries, community-based partners, and policy experts, providing the critical insight and guidance needed for our path forward. Our Recovery Task Force will be built around 5 key recovery areas. First, policy and economic stimulus. Addressing the economic impact of this crisis will be led by Melody Hobson of Ariel Investments, Roberto Herencia of Byline Bank, Bob Ryder of the Chicago Federation of Labor, and Jenny Scanlon of UL. Second, mental and emotional health. Developing strategies to help us move forward from the anxiety and loss created by COVID-19. This effort will be led by Evelyn Diaz from the Heartland Alliance, Karen Freeman Wilson, former Mayor of Gary, and now the chair of the Chicago Urban League, and Alexa James from the National Alliance of Mental Illness. Third, marketing and business development, to tell the story of the diversity, strength, and resiliency of our 77 communities. This effort will be led by Sandra Cordova-Misek of Window to the World Communications, Richard Edelman, who needs no introduction, who leads his namesake company, and Anton Seals of Grow Greater Inglewood. Fourth, regional coordination, to engage our partners outside Chicago because our success is intertwined. This will be led by President Tony Preckwinkle of Cook County, Chairman Dan Cronin of DuPage County, Mayor Joseph Tamburino of Hillside, and the Executive Chair of the Metropolitan Caucus of Mayors, and Alderman Gil Villegas. And finally, an economic change study to gauge the full extent of economic hardship, led by Ben Harris of Northwestern and Ajin Poe of the National Domestic Workers Alliance. Now, these and many others are the men and women who give voice to all the facets of our city and walks of life, who themselves have stepped up in this unprecedented crisis to help lead us through our historic recovery. But make no mistake, while they will lead their committees, they will be working with countless others across our city, our neighborhoods, and our region. And we'll be creating opportunities for public input, which we have seen time and again as not just valuable, but vital to the success of any action that we take. And all of this will operate in close alignment with measures we've already taken in response to COVID-19. From our Small Business Resiliency Fund, to our Housing Fund, to the ongoing work of our Racial Equity Rapid Response Team. And we will build on our bold measures already underway in the neighborhood development and poverty eradication with programs like Invest Southwest and solutions towards ending poverty. My friends, this is what a recovery task force looks like. This is what a recovery task force needs to look like. We are the great American city of Chicago. We must be a model for the rest of the nation on how to move forward, and we will be. There's no denying we are facing significant challenges when it comes to reopening our economy and our neighborhoods and our city. But when we do, we'll be ready to hit the ground running, to put our city back on track and continue our mission of building a new Chicago that is inclusive and accessible where everyone has a place. It was nearly 150 years ago when our fellow Chicagoans stood at this very place and began their journey forward. And it is us now, a century and a half later, meeting here again to embark on a new historic effort of recovery and growth. I want to thank you all for being here, and I'm excited about the journey in the weeks and months ahead. It's my pleasure to invite Alderman Gil Villegas to the podium to say a few words. Gil?
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mayor Lightfoot, for putting this task force together to advise the city and the region on recovery from this COVID-19 crisis. It's going to be crucial that everyone in the city and the region, from the city council to the mayor's office, is working together to think through the challenges that our Chicagoans are facing. As aldermen, we have seen firsthand the impact of the crisis on many of our residents, from those who are facing health challenges to the economic hardship that has come from being unable to work or being laid off or furloughed. This will be a collaborative effort with input from throughout the city, and I look forward to working with my colleagues in the city council, the mayor, our regional partners, and this task force to put the best ideas for recovery on the table. We already have great ideas coming in, and I look forward to hearing more great ideas, but I'm going to urge my fellow task force members to find long-term solutions in addition to emergency measures. The fallout from this pandemic will be felt in our neighborhoods for years to come, unless we can find systemic ways to help our small businesses, chambers of commerce, and not-for-profits. They will fail and our neighborhoods will never recover. But I'm always optimistic when it comes to our city. Chicago is the greatest city on earth, and I know we can and will recover. In fact, we can use this as an opportunity to rebuild our economy for the future. We can empower our small businesses, we can fill empty storefronts in neighborhoods and downtown. I can attest to the fact that the mayor and her team are working hard every day to ensure Chicago will emerge stronger than ever. I applaud her for bringing in this world-class team to assist. Now I'm here to challenge this world-class group. We have a huge task in front of us. The stakes could not be higher. If we fail, our city will suffer for a generation. On the other hand, if we are successful, Chicago will be stronger than ever. So I'm ready to get started, and I have my Zoom information ready to go. Next, I'd like to bring up the chairman of Byline Bank, Roberto Herencia.
Thank you, Gil, and good afternoon. Thank you, Mayor Lightfoot, for all that you and your team are doing to give us hope and turn hope into action. Health and safety will always be first, of course, but critical to the city's well-being are thriving businesses, job opportunities, and of course, high employment rates. I spend many hours a day now talking to customers and small business owners who are frankly experiencing a great deal of concern, great uncertainty, and fear as well. Chicago has a storied banking tradition, and the state of Illinois is actually home to the second largest number of community banks in the country. This is actually a meaningful community asset, which we cannot forget as we enter the early innings of what will be a long journey back. This is not time to be competitive among ourselves or across industries. It is the time to collaborate and work together within the framework that the mayor has outlined here today, which is anchored in fairness and, above all, compassion. I look forward to advising the mayor and our distinguished colleagues in this critical endeavor. My pleasure now to introduce Bob Ryder, President of the Chicago Federation of Labor.
Good afternoon. My name is Bob Ryder. I'm President of the Chicago Federation of Labor. On behalf of myself and Secretary Treasurer Don Villar, I want to thank Mayor Lightfoot for having me here today and inviting the CFL to join this task force. The CFL represents 300 affiliate unions who in turn represent roughly 500,000 working women and men in Chicago and Cook County. Our affiliates represent everyone from frontline workers saving lives in hospitals to the essential workers staffing our grocery stores, pharmacies, and public transportation, to our tradespeople like the pipe fitters, sheet metal workers, and our folks in McCormick Place like Decorators Local 17. And as we heard the sirens earlier, let us sit on that for a second and think about all the members, union members that work for the Chicago Police Department, everyone from the civilian folks to the people out on the street, and the members of Firefighters Local 2 who drive our city's ambulances. We're just down the street from Northwestern Hospital where we have unionized healthcare workers taking care of patients not only suffering from COVID-19, but all the other things that we face every day in terms of compromises to our own health and safety. Working people have sacrificed their health, safety, and livelihoods during this pandemic, bravely risking their own lives to make sure this city keeps moving. We all owe all of these workers a debt of gratitude. As Mayor Lightfoot said earlier, we stand here today at Water Tower, and I'm reminded of how the Great Chicago Fire was followed in 1871 by that great rebuilding, a period of rapid growth and important reforms to protect our city and its working people. After the fire, the Chicago City Council reformed the city's building code to protect Chicagoans, prohibiting the use of wood in downtown buildings and promoting the use of fire-resistant materials like brick and marble. These requirements, along with our other construction advances, made possible the invention of the skyscraper here in Chicago. And because of collective action and policy change stemming from the disaster, our city emerged stronger than ever. In fact, the American labor movement spirit was in some ways born in the struggles that emerged from the Great Chicago Fire. This crisis is very different, and our great rebuilding will be very different. But I believe that together we can build a stronger Chicago, a fairer Chicago, a more just Chicago, and a more vibrant Chicago, just like we did after the Great Fire. It's crystal clear that there has been and will continue to be significant damage to the livelihoods of thousands of Chicago workers. Predicting when the economy can reopen is anyone's guess. This virus has been unpredictable from the start. But while we know the impacts will be devastating when it's over, we cannot hesitate to take the first steps now to ensure that there's a plan. The work of this task force is to help the city understand the long-term implications of the pandemic on Chicago's economy, how certain businesses and industries will be impacted, and what we all must do to support and strengthen the working class and the citizens of the city of Chicago. The working class of this city has been the backbone of this great metropolitan gem of the Midwest from the very beginning. I've seen many people and corporations refer to essential workers as heroes throughout the crisis, and they're not wrong. But what our working people need is more than just a thank you. Working people need an ambitious plan for recovery that will not just return workers to the pre-pandemic status quo, but strengthen worker protections and shape a new era of prosperity for the working class of Chicago, along with the rest of the city. And we need to remember that if we have a consumer-based economy in this country, and the consumers that we have to take care of are not just the small businesses and all the employers that we see up and down Michigan Avenue, but the people who go and shop in the stores throughout our entire region. People need to have money in order to go in and be part of lifting up our economy. So if we're going to have a consumer-based economy, we have to have consumers. So this task force will, I know, come together to make sure that we come up with an economic plan that works for everyone. And I'm confident that when we get through to the other side, the city of Chicago will be stronger, more resilient, and better equipped to serve its communities for the future. I look forward to working with everyone on this task force. And now I'd like to introduce Alexa James, Executive Director, National Alliance of Mental Illness, Chicago.
Good afternoon. Like all of my colleagues, I applaud Mayor Lightfoot's leadership throughout this crisis and for always prioritizing mental health in this new recovery task force. To my colleagues, I've been on a task force that she has chaired before, so I hope everyone gets rest this weekend and says goodbye to their families for a few weeks. We have a lot of work to do. This has truly been a traumatic time for the residents of Chicago and the world. We are losing dozens of our residents every day from this disease. And nearly everyone can identify with the fear and anxiety caused by the shutdown of our city and our economy. The disease seems to know no bounds, and there is real grief in people's hearts about what we have lost and what has changed. Whether it's the change in the lives of our loved ones, missing milestones like high school graduations and weddings, financial insecurity and instability in our communities, we are all feeling a tremendous sense of loss. We have seen firsthand through the significant increase in our work at NAMI Chicago and the needs of our callers, the impact is deep and complicated. And the fears that people may have will continue even when the stay-at-home order is lifted. Recovering from this crisis won't be easy, and snapping our fingers and asking everybody to go back to normal. We will need to recognize the trauma the city has faced. We know that when a traumatic event occurs, it is the response that's weeks and months after that are just important as the days following the trauma. This task force is an opportunity to plan our response to the long-term impact this crisis will have on the emotional health of our community. Serving on the Mental and Emotional Health Committee, I look forward to the opportunity to step up and find strategies that can help us all heal. This might include residents giving remembrance to the crisis of those lost, creating strategies for coping with loss and anxiety, and helping the most vulnerable connect with the care that they need, building on the work that NAMI Chicago and thousands of social service providers do in our great city 24/7. Together, we can emerge from this crisis stronger and more connected. We can make crucial adjustments to the safety net that will help our city be healthier, safer, and more equitable in the long term. All of it will supplement the critical work of our public health leaders that they are doing day in and day out to save lives and help residents get healthy again. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I would love to introduce Anton Seals, the Executive Director of Grow Greater Englewood.
Good afternoon. I'm Anton Seals Jr. The junior is important. There's a father still alive. Thank you, Mayor Lightfoot, for inviting us to take part of this COVID-19 recovery task force, in particular my role as the co-chair of the Business Development and Marketing Task Force. I think before this crisis, there was already a crisis. And for many small businesses across this city, in particular Black and brown businesses, they had been struggling. I'm here to bring those voices to this task force, to make sure that it doesn't just live on paper, that it actually exists in real time. This is such an enormous crisis that we're all dealing with. And I think being here at the Water Tower is an appropriate signal of how we might reimagine what the call is and action for all of us to take part of as Chicagoans. We have been segmented into two different Chicagos over the last several years. We see each other in two different categories. And then here, in this opportunity, as we start thinking about when we recover, what does that look like? It must be bold, it must be transformative, and justice and equity must be at the center of that. In order for us to really call this place Sweet Home Chicago again, right? So that we can have more people who want to come here and stay here and live here. There's this opportunity. And so I want to make sure that we are bringing those voices to this task force. And I really appreciate you inviting us to bring those voices, the Black farmers, the opportunity for cooperative economics to emerge, new economic systems to emerge in this great city, the city by the lake, and never second to none. Thank you.
And now I'd invite President Tony Preckwinkle from the Cook County Board to the podium.
Thank you, Mayor Lightfoot. I apologize for my late arrival. We had a Cook County Board meeting this morning. As we look at the impact of COVID-19 on our region, we have to continue to rely on a science-based and data-driven framework to guide our planning for recovery. I'm proud to work with our fellow leaders to address the issues confronting us, including prioritizing the devastating impact that this virus has had on our most vulnerable populations, particularly our Black and brown communities, as well as businesses in our region. Cook County has had a long track record of working closely with the city and the collar counties to lay the foundation for regional economic growth and development. And the formation of the Recovery Task Force is yet another example of local government collaboration to deliver comprehensive solutions during this turbulent time. Our economies are regional. Businesses and residents did not pay attention to municipal boundaries. We share labor markets and supply chains. People live in one county and work in the city or vice versa. This task force provides us a space to continue the work we've been doing to advance the entire region via sector-based economic development and provide direction for our real impact. This pandemic has forced millions of people in the Chicagoland region out of their jobs, with the most vulnerable communities being the hardest hit. Small businesses, not-for-profit organizations, gig workers, artists, and independent contractors are experiencing unprecedented challenges due to the global outbreak of COVID-19, and many of them are in the fight of their lives to stay operational, and recovery is paramount to all of us now. There's no silver bullet for turning things around, but I'm convinced that we can improve our regional outlook through collaborative efforts. Regions with the least inequality, perform the best. And for this to happen, we need to work together to drive this change. Bringing together leaders across Illinois' diverse economic and social sectors to chart a path forward to recovery in the wake of COVID-19 is a strong approach and one that's critical to getting our communities back on their feet during this unprecedented time. Again, I'm honored to be one of dozens of leaders in business, labor, health, and philanthropy who are stepping up, committing their time and talent to this effort. The city and 130 municipalities in Cook County applaud Mayor Lightfoot for demonstrating strong leadership for all Chicagoans. I hope we will emerge stronger from this crisis, and together we will continue our work as one Cook County. Thank you.
And now, happy to take your questions.
Hello. Mayor, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm just wondering, as you have requested these emergency powers, and that's on hold, is this in any way in relation to that to form this task force for those who might be wary that you're going to operate in some kind of vacuum and not seek advice?
Well, 24 formal briefings over the last 6 weeks, not to mention the literally hundreds of hours that we spent with aldermen, connecting them up with individual commissioners and so forth. I don't see how anyone could credibly say that we've been operating in a vacuum. What we've asked for is the flexibility and nimbleness to be able to continue the necessary work. You know, some have said, well, we can meet within 48 hours. I think that is really simplistic. When we are literally every single day competing for not just the supplies for our healthcare workers and our first responders, but literally tests that we need to be able to expand the testing across the city, we don't have 48 hours. We barely have 4 hours. If we delay, we lose. And the reality is, if you want to have the regular cadence on city council where we brief aldermen, then we have the committee hearing, then we have the city council, that's probably more like 6 days. In a pandemic, we don't have that kind of time. Anything large and substantive, now that we have the Zoom structure to be able to conduct committee meetings and city council meetings, we're going to be bringing those things to the aldermen in the normal course, as we would in any other circumstance. But we continue to need the flexibility to move in minutes or hours, not days.
And so will these folks be your go-to? Can you just give us a little more?
Well, I mean, I think so the purpose of this is really separate from the question that you asked. We've been thinking a lot, as have ordinary Chicagoans, ordinary Illinoisans across our region, what's my future look like? That's a question that is on everyone's mind. And so the purpose of this recovery task force and the many facets of it is to help answer that question for us as a region. So we are still very much in the thick of the fight, and Dr. Arwady would be the first to tell you, while we've made progress, we're a long way from being out of the woods, but at the same time, we need to plan in a thoughtful, deliberative way about what the future is going to look like at the neighborhood level, at the block level, but also at the city and the regional level. That's what this task force is all about, is framing out and assessing the damage that's been done, the harm, both in economic terms and social emotional terms, and then building a framework for us to transition out of stay at home when that time is right.
As you had suggested earlier in the week, we have now confirmed that the governor will be announcing the stay-at-home order is in place until May 30th. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that's appropriate. I mean, the governor has a good team of data scientists that he is relying upon. And, you know, a month ago in March, we were all thinking that this week would be the peak that we would reach. But what I think we've seen now is not so much a peak, but a flattening. And that's a good thing, but we don't know at this point how long it's going to take, not just to flatten, but to decrease. And that decrease in a number of daily cases, decreases in hospitalizations, ICU beds, use of vents, all those metrics that we've been talking about all along, we need to see those realities come into fruition, and we're just not there yet.
Could we hear from Dr. Arwady
Sure.
about that as well? Because today's Chicago Sun-Times did have more about the research and about the different models. Are those the same models you're looking at? And if this continues through August, that's a lot to digest.
So I think let's not take August till we get to August. Right now, today, what we know is we are absolutely making excellent progress. And as the mayor said, the fact that we've actually seen this peak push further out in time is a testament to the fact that we flattened the curve. If you think back to that picture that we always talk about, if we had seen that very rapid increase, like we were seeing in early and mid-March, we would have peaked by now. We also would have completely overwhelmed our healthcare system and seen a very large number of deaths. So as you actually flatten the curve, part of that progress is seeing that peak actually push a little bit later. And so I know it's hard when people are feeling, oh, I really want to, I want to move on. We all want to move on, but we want to move on in a way that we are confident that as we start to carefully reopen things, as we think about all of this economic recovery and what that looks like, we have to pair that with making sure that we do not see a big second surge of cases. If you see a second surge of cases in a way that you, again, overwhelm your healthcare system, see very large numbers of ill people and deaths, that people, you're not able to really handle that, then you have to take a huge step backwards. It is the right thing to be thinking about this carefully in a data-driven way. There are a number of models out there, and I think it's actually, to me, one of the most interesting parts of the conversation. I can tell you that in addition to the modeling that's been done looking at, exactly where this will peak, and you'll see things that are, a few days here and there, and it might be slightly different in Chicago versus all of Illinois, but broadly as a region, we're on the flattening, we'll be coming down shortly, we're making progress. We've also, though, been working, like just this morning, for example, we were looking with one of the modeling teams that we work with here at Argonne National Labs that have been doing some really nice projections that are saying when you open at different points, when you open in ways that are over a few weeks to a little longer in different phases, and when you include how well people continue to social distance as you open, you see really different results in that. And so we feel really confident that we've been able to look, in a Chicago-focused way, just as the state has looked across the state, that we know sort of where we've been. We're using the exact data, plugging it into the model. We know we're getting close. We're, of course, wanting to get back, and we want to make sure that as that happens, it's in a way that is safest for the most people, is certainly bringing the economy and the social and the mental health aspects along. We're thinking of those in the same way. But the last thing that we want to do is move too fast and then have to take a big step backwards. So the models are showing us that we're making progress, and we're confident that we will continue to do so in a way that's best for Chicago and Illinois.
Thank you. Mayor, there was also a report that school in the fall might be virtual as well.
Look, we don't know that at this stage, but I think one of the things that all of us are thinking about, and obviously CPS as well, is what if, and making sure that we're truly prepared. We've learned a tremendous amount across all of our city government, our sister agencies, and I think from the business community as well, and you've heard a lot of that articulated here today. So we know that we're sometime in 2021 at the earliest before there's a vaccine, so we have to be prepared for a lot of different contingencies, including a worst case contingency. We want to make sure that our children learn. I'm very concerned about where they have been over these last 6 to 8 weeks and where they're going to be through the end of June when school officially ends. What happens during the summer? We always worry about the summer slump, particularly worried about that this year. So we want to stand up systems and structures now to be prepared, but also to continue to support our young people in particular, because this is really, really difficult stuff on them.
We've learned that part of the executive order from the governor will be to require masks in public, face coverings, that is, if you are not able to social distance. Do you believe Chicagoans have the ability to have a face covering? Are there enough out there?
Well, I haven't seen the written language, but what has been described to me, which is consistent with what you just said, isn't radically different than really what we've been talking about all along. I think guidance from IDPH, also CDPH, for some weeks now said, if you can't social distance, wear some kind of a face covering. I do worry a little bit about that, though, in the ability of our residents, particularly in poorer neighborhoods, to be able to access materials to provide that. I don't believe in giving mandates to people without being able to give them the tools to be successful. So once we see what the guidance is from the governor, we're going to work hard to make sure that we can actually give our residents the ability to comply. We're not going to ticket and arrest people because they don't have face coverings, but it is to their benefit, as we've been saying for some time, to use face covering, particularly in areas like grocery stores, pharmacies, and other places where social distancing has become more complicated. However, I will say this. I was actually just in Mariano's and Bronzeville last night. I think our grocery stores in particular have really taken a lot of steps forward, both to protect the workers, but also to protect shoppers so that they can shop in a safe environment.
Thank you. Could I ask County Board President Preckwinkle a question, please? Since I have not been able to speak with you recently, I know there's been some changes in who leads your health department. Terry Mason was let go at the beginning of the month, and in the midst of all of this, why? And are you confident about how the county health department is being run today?
You know, I'm very grateful to Terry Mason for his leadership, his outreach, his public education, particularly his focus on the African American community and talking to us about the chronic conditions that many of us face. This was a time when we needed somebody who was really strong in administration and operations. And I believe that Dr. Rachel Rubin and Dr. Kiran Joshi, who are our co-leaders now of the Department of Public Health, meet that need. And I'm very pleased with the work that they've done and look forward to their leadership.
And Providence Hospital, the ER was closed, now reopened. Where does that stand?
One of our healthcare workers at Provident got COVID-19, and clearly that whole emergency room needed to be deeply cleaned. And as we looked at the configuration of the emergency room, we realized it was very difficult to do social distancing. So over the 2 weeks that the emergency room was closed, and by the way, the hospital remained open. We deep cleaned and reconfigured the space so that it is a safer environment for both our healthcare workers who are there and our patients who come into the emergency room.
And do you support Governor Pritzker's extension of the stay-at-home order until May 30th?
You know, I think this is a science-based consideration, and we want to do everything we can to protect our residents from the terrible impact of this pandemic, and of course I agree with them.
One more question for Bob Ryder, please, from union workers. I just wonder, because you do hear a lot of folks who are saying how difficult this is, they want to say so, and they're saying, let us decide if we should go back. Are you not hearing that from some of your workers who are worried about their income and feeding their families? Where do you stand on the 30 extra days extension on the stay-at-home order?
It doesn't do us any good to reopen the economy if the economy can't stay open. It doesn't do us any good to send workers back into the workforce if they're not safe. For every person that you hear from that is demanding that they want to go back to work because they don't believe that this disease is as bad as getting the flu, you hear a rush of other people coming over the top wanting to make sure that they are not putting themselves in the harm's way when they go back to work. So I think what we've found is that when you see people speaking out about wanting to reopen the economy, it's not people that have, it's not the majority of people. It's fringe parts of our society who are trying to politicize a process that should be science-based, that needs to be analytical, that needs to think about the long term and protect the working people of our city.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. And then, Mayor, just one last one. Congress this afternoon set to vote on the $483 billion package. How will that impact Chicago, if at all?
Well, the pieces of it that I understand, I think the most significant pieces are more support for small businesses. I was just talking with Roberto Herencia from Byline Bank about that issue, because Byline Bank is one of the banks that is processing the loans through a Small Business Administration. I'm cursed today. But what we know is we have got to get more money into the hands of small businesses, so replenishing the SBA fund is critically important. I also believe that there's additional monies for hospitals and healthcare. That's all good. Now, all of us know that even though there's been an extraordinary amount of money that's been pushed out for COVID-related expenses and costs, there's so much more that needs to be done. I joined literally a chorus, a tabernacle of mayors who are saying, you've got to help us replace lost income. I know every elected official here recognizes when you shut down huge sectors of our economy, there's going to be an impact. And there's going to be an impact in Chicago just as there is across our region, across our state. So we've been in regular conversation with our federal partners to really emphasize that point and talk about what the rescue package 4 should look like.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We only have time for 2 more questions. Shia at Politico is asking if you could share what you have asked for in terms of economic relief from the federal government in specific terms.
Well, we're finalizing what the specific buckets are, but it's things like helping us replace lost revenue, and we're in the process of quantifying that, but that's a critical piece of it, and again, we would like that to be directed to the cities. I think that they need to lower the threshold. Right, in the last package, it was 500,000 or more population. I'm hearing from mayors all across the region that say, we got left out. That can't be. They're a vital part of the region as well. We're looking at ways in which we can get more supports to most vulnerable aspects of our community. Homeless, housing is a huge issue. You know, we're having this debate here in Chicago as it's playing out nationally around supports for renters, supports for landlords, and mortgage relief from the banks. That has got to be a big part of, I think, going forward.
Lamore, some community groups and others, including your aldermen, were asking that money that would have been spent on summer festivals be used for emergency assistance for undocumented and unbanked residents. Mayor, can you respond?
Well, look, I've made no mistake about the fact that we absolutely need to be supporting our immigrant and refugee communities, particularly those who are undocumented, that are not going to be the beneficiaries of the federal dollars that are flowing. That's why we've done things in the city without restrictions regarding citizenship, but the need is still quite great. But the specific ask, I would just request that the aldermen who are pushing this, and I think one of them is Carlos Rosa, these festivals get their money because they make money. If we cancel them, there's no revenue stream to support it. So it's not like there's a pool of money sitting there ready to support these programs. If we don't put the programs on, if we don't have ticket sales and we don't have advertising, there's no money. So it's really very simple math.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, thank you, folks.